Listen closely. 2026 will separate those who execute from those who excuse. The habits you build in the next 12 months will either make you unstoppable or leave you wondering why nothing changed. This isn't about morning routines or productivity hacks. This is about 7 specific, uncommon habits that rewire how you think, decide, and act under pressure. These aren't trendy, they're not comfortable, but they work. And if you can't handle the truth about what it takes to actually transform, stop listening now, because what you're about to hear demands you choose comfort or control. You can't have both. Let's begin. Listen, we need to talk about something most people refuse to acknowledge. Something that's been destroying your potential for years. The execution gap. That massive, brutal distance between what you say you're going to do and what you actually do. And 2026 is going to expose it. Completely. Mercilessly. Without exception. Every single January, the same thing happens. Millions of people set goals. They buy journals, they create vision boards, they tell everyone about their plans. New year, new me, right? They're going to lose weight this time. They're going to start that business. They're going to read more, save more, become more. The intention is real. The excitement is genuine. And by February, maybe March if they're stubborn, it's over. Dead, abandoned, forgotten. You know this is true because you've done it. Maybe not every year, but enough times that there's a pattern. And here's what nobody wants to admit. It's not because you're lazy. It's not because you lack information. You have more access to knowledge than any generation in human history. You can learn anything, anytime, from anywhere. That's not the problem. The problem is that you've confused intention with action. You've convinced yourself that planning equals progress, that wanting something badly enough is the same as doing something about it. It isn't. This is resolution culture, and it's a trap. It's the belief that a decision made on January 1st, when you're motivated and optimistic and full of energy, will somehow carry you through the entire year. Through the stress, through the setbacks, through the days when you don't feel like it, through the moments when no one's watching and the easier choice is right there in front of you. Resolution culture is built on a foundation of emotion, and emotion is the worst possible foundation for lasting change. Here's what actually happens. You set a goal based on how you feel in a peak moment. That feeling fades. It always fades. And when it does, you're left with nothing but the gap, the execution gap, the space between who you said you'd be and who you actually are. And every day that gap doesn't close, it gets wider. Every day you don't execute, you're training yourself that your word means nothing, that your commitments are negotiable, that you're the kind of person who starts things but doesn't finish them. 2026 will not be different unless you are different. Read that again. The year doesn't change you change you. The calendar flipping to a new number means absolutely nothing if you're bringing the same habits, the same excuses, the same weak patterns into it. Time doesn't fix you, execution does. Now let's talk about why everything you've been taught about habits is incomplete. Most habit advice works perfectly under ideal conditions. When you're rested, when you're motivated, when life is calm and predictable and nothing unexpected happens. The problem is, life is never like that for long. Pressure comes, stress arrives, chaos interrupts, and suddenly all those carefully constructed habits collapse like a house of cards. You've experienced this. You start strong. You wake up early for a week. You meal prep on Sunday. You hit the gym 4 days straight. Then work gets crazy, or someone gets sick, or something breaks, or you just have a really bad day, and instead of the habit carrying you through, you abandon it completely. Because the habit wasn't built to withstand pressure, it was built for perfect conditions, and perfect conditions don't exist. The most dangerous habit advice tells you to start small, to make it easy, to reduce friction. And yes, that works for building the initial behavior, but it doesn't work for maintaining it when life punches you in the face. You need habits that function when you're tired, when you're discouraged, when you're tempted to quit, when every part of you wants to take the easy way out. That's the standard. That's the actual requirement for transformation. Think about it. A habit that only works when you feel like it isn't a habit. It's a preference. It's a hobby. Real habits are the things you do especially when you don't want to. The workout when you're exhausted. The healthy meal when you're craving junk. the difficult conversation when you'd rather avoid it, the work when you'd rather scroll. That's where habits are proven, not in the easy moments, in the hard ones. So if traditional habit systems fail under real pressure, what's the alternative? That's where these 7 habits come in. And I need you to understand something critical right now. These are not additions to your current routine. You're not stacking these on top of everything else you're already doing. These are replacements. Replacements for the weak patterns that are currently running your life. Each of these 7 habits targets a specific failure point, a specific place where you break down, where you give in, where you choose comfort over control. Let's name them. Indecision, emotional reactivity, validation seeking, mental weakness, distraction, inconsistency, and comfort addiction. If you're honest, at least 4 of those are active problems in your life right now. Maybe all 7. These habits are designed to function as a system, not individually, but together. Pre-decision kills indecision. Emotional control stops reactivity. Silent execution removes validation seeking. Voluntary discomfort destroys comfort addiction. Energy audits eliminate distractions. Failure exposure builds mental toughness. Weekly review prevents inconsistency. You see how this works? Each habit reinforces the others. Each one makes the next one easier. Together, they create a foundation that doesn't crumble under pressure. It gets stronger. But here's what this actually requires. You have to be willing to replace your current operating system. Most people want to add good habits while keeping their bad ones. They want to wake up early, but still scroll for an hour before bed. They want to eat healthy, but refuse to give up their nightly ice cream. They want to build a business, but won't sacrifice their weekend Netflix binges. That's not how this works. You can't build a new structure on a broken foundation. The execution gap exists because you keep choosing comfort. Every single time there's a choice between what you said you'd do and what feels easier in the moment, you pick easier. And you justify it. You rationalize it. You tell yourself it's just this once, that you'll start again tomorrow, that you deserve a break. And maybe you do deserve a break, but what you deserve and what you need are not the same thing. What you need is to close the gap. What you need is to become someone whose actions match their words. That's what these 7 habits build. Not a better version of who you are, a completely different person. Someone who doesn't operate on emotion. Someone who doesn't need external validation. Someone who doesn't flinch when discomfort arrives. Someone who reviews, adjusts, and executes consistently, regardless of how they feel. That person doesn't have an execution gap. That person says it and does it, every time, without exception. So here's the reality you're facing. 2026 is coming whether you're ready or not, and it will measure you. Not by your intentions, not by your plans, not by what you almost did or meant to do. It will measure you by what you actually executed, by the gap between your words and your actions. And that gap will either shrink or grow. There is no maintaining. You're either closing it through relentless execution, or you're widening it through continued excuses. The choice is yours, but make no mistake, this is a choice, and you're making it right now. Either you commit to these 7 habits, to building them into a system that makes discipline automatic, or you continue the pattern that's been failing you. 1 year from now, you'll have your answer. You'll know which choice you made. Not because of what you're feeling right now, but because of what you actually did after this moment ended. The execution gap is real. It's measurable. And it's the only thing standing between you and everything you say you want. Close it. Or spend another year wondering why nothing changed. Chapter 2. Pre-decide everything. Here's a truth that will change everything if you let it. Every decision you make in the moment burns willpower. Every single one. And you only have so much willpower to spend in a day. So when you wake up and debate whether to get out of bed or hit snooze, you just spent willpower. When you stand in front of the fridge deciding what to eat, you just spent willpower. When you consider whether to work out or skip it just this once, you just spent willpower. And by the time you actually need that willpower for something important, it's gone, depleted, empty. This is why you fail. Not because you lack discipline, but because you're wasting your discipline on decisions that should have already been made. You're negotiating with yourself 100 times a day, and every negotiation is an opportunity to lose, to rationalize, to take the easier path, to tell yourself that tomorrow will be different, even though you know it won't be. The most disciplined people you'll ever meet don't have more willpower than you. They just don't waste it on repetitive decisions. They pre-decide. They make the choice once, lock it in, and remove the option to debate. What time they wake up, what they eat for breakfast, when they work out, what they wear, what they work on first. These aren't daily decisions, they're pre-decisions, made once, executed forever. Think about that. Executed forever. Not until they don't feel like it. Not until something better comes along. Not until motivation fades. Forever. Because the decision has already been made. There's nothing left to debate. Let me give you a real example. There's a CEO running a company worth over $50 million. This man has more flexibility than most people will ever have. He could wake up whenever he wants, work from anywhere, set his own schedule completely, and yet, every single morning he wakes up at 5 a.m. Not because he loves it, not because he's naturally a morning person, but because 15 years ago he decided that's what successful people in his industry do. He made the decision once, and he's executed it every day since. No debate, no negotiation, no conversation with himself about whether today is different. You know what that does? It creates certainty. It eliminates the mental energy drain of wondering what you should do. It removes the emotional roller coaster of motivation. It makes discipline automatic. Because discipline isn't a feeling. It's not something you summon when you're inspired. Discipline is a pre-made decision that executes regardless of how you feel in the moment. So here's what you need to do. You need to create your locked schedule. 5 non-negotiable daily actions that happen no matter what. Not 7, not 10, 5. Because if you try to make everything non-negotiable, nothing is. 5 specific behaviors that define your day, that create the foundation everything else is built on. And you need to choose them right now. Not tomorrow. Not after you think about it. Right now. What are they? Only you know. But I'll tell you what they're not. They're not vague intentions. They're not goals. They're not things you'd like to do. They're specific, measurable actions with no room for interpretation. Not eat healthier. That's meaningless. I eat 4 eggs and oatmeal at 6:30 a.m. is a pre-decision. Not exercise more. That's a wish. I train for 45 minutes at 5:30 a.m. Monday through Friday is a pre-decision. You see the difference? One leaves room for negotiation, the other doesn't. Here's why this is so powerful. When your alarm goes off at 5 a.m. and every part of you wants to stay in bed, you're not making a decision in that moment. The decision was already made. You're just executing. There's no internal debate, no weighing the options, no just 10 more minutes. The alarm sounds, you get up. That's it. The conversation is over before it starts. And this applies to everything. When the junk food appears at the office, you're not deciding whether to eat it. You already decided what you eat and when. When the invitation to skip your workout comes, you're not weighing your options. The workout is locked in. When the distraction pulls at your attention during your work block, you're not considering it. You pre-decided what you work on and when. Every pre-decision is a wall, a boundary, a line that doesn't move. But here's where most people fail with this. They pre-decide and then they make exceptions. I'll wake up at 5 a.m. every day except weekends. That's not a pre-decision. That's a preference. I'll eat clean except for 1 cheat meal a week. You just gave yourself an escape hatch, and your brain will find it every time. I'll work out every day unless I'm really tired or something comes up. Congratulations, you just made it optional. And optional means it won't happen. Pre-decisions have no exceptions. None. That's what makes them powerful. That's what makes them work. The moment you build in flexibility, you've created a negotiation point. And negotiations are where discipline dies. Because in the moment, your emotional brain will always find a reason why today is different, why you've earned a break, why this one time doesn't matter. And if you listen to that voice, you've already lost. So when you create your 5 non-negotiables, you need to be ruthless. No wiggle room, no special circumstances, no unless. Just the action and the commitment. And then you need to install the mantra that protects that commitment. Say it out loud right now. I don't decide in the moment. I decided already. Say it again. I don't decide in the moment. I decided already. That sentence is your weapon against hesitation, because hesitation is where execution dies. That gap between the alarm and getting up, between knowing what you should eat and reaching for what you want, between starting the work and checking your phone. Hesitation is the crack where discipline leaks out, and the mantra seals it. When your alarm goes off and your brain starts negotiating, you don't engage. You just repeat. I don't decide in the moment. I decided already. When the food temptation appears, when the workout feels hard, when the work feels boring, you don't debate. You don't consider. You just repeat the mantra and execute the pre-decision, over and over and over, until it becomes automatic. Until the behavior happens without conscious thought, until you've become the kind of person who doesn't negotiate with themselves. And here's what happens when you do this consistently. You start to trust yourself. Right now, if you're honest, you don't completely trust yourself. You say you're going to do something, and part of you knows you might not. You set a goal, and there's doubt whether you'll follow through. That doubt exists because of your track record, because of all the times you didn't execute, all the times you made an exception, all the times the gap between your words and your actions stayed wide open. Pre-decisions close that gap. When you say you're going to do something and then you do it, regardless of how you feel, you're depositing trust in the bank. You're proving to yourself that your word means something, that when you commit, it happens. And after weeks of this, months of this, you become someone different. Someone who doesn't question whether they'll follow through. Someone who knows that what they say and what they do are the same thing. That's the person who wins. Not the person with the most motivation. Not the person with the best circumstances. The person who pre-decides and executes every single time, without exception, without negotiation, without hesitation. So here's your assignment. Right now, before you move forward, write down 5 non-negotiable daily actions. Specific, measurable, time-stamped if possible. Then commit. Not to trying, not to doing your best. Commit to executing them every single day for the next 30 days, with 0 exceptions. And when the moment comes to execute, and you feel the hesitation, and your brain starts offering reasons why today is different, you repeat the mantra. I don't decide in the moment. I decided already. Then you execute, because that's what you do now. You're not the person who debates anymore. You're the person who pre-decides and executes. Lock it in.
Chapter 3. Master the Pause. You are being controlled right now, every single day, and you don't even realize it. Someone criticizes you and you react. Someone cuts you off in traffic and you explode. Someone questions your work and you defend. Someone pushes your buttons and you respond exactly how they knew you would. You think you're being authentic. You think you're standing up for yourself. You think you're expressing your feelings. But here's the truth. You're a puppet, and everyone around you knows exactly which strings to pull. The person who reacts instantly is controllable, completely, predictably, reliably. Because reaction isn't power. It's weakness dressed up as strength. It feels powerful in the moment. It feels like you're taking control. But you're not. You're handing control to whoever triggered you. They acted, you reacted. They led, you followed. They're driving, you're just responding to where they steer you. And this is costing you everything. Relationships, opportunities, respect, careers, peace of mind. Because when you react emotionally in the moment, you say things you can't take back. You make decisions you regret. You burn bridges you needed. You reveal weaknesses your enemies will exploit. All because you couldn't create space between what happened and how you responded. That space is called the pause, and it's the difference between someone who controls their life and someone whose life controls them. The pause is that gap between stimulus and response, between what happens to you and what you do about it. And right now, for most people, that gap doesn't exist. Something happens and they react instantly, automatically, emotionally, without thought, without strategy, without control. This ends now. Because 2026 demands you build the habit of the pause, the 3-second gap where you choose your reaction instead of being owned by it. 3 seconds. That's it. Not 3 minutes, not 3 hours, 3 seconds. But in those 3 seconds, everything changes. Here's how it works. Something happens. Someone says something that makes your blood boil. Your boss criticizes you unfairly. Your partner says something cutting. A stranger disrespects you. Your competitor attacks you publicly. In that moment, your brain floods with emotion. Anger, hurt, frustration, rage. And your body wants to react, to defend, to attack back, to prove them wrong, to make them feel what you're feeling. But you don't. Instead, you count, silently. 1, 2, 3. That's it. Just 3 seconds. And in those 3 seconds, you ask yourself one question. Is this reaction moving me toward my goal or away from it? Not, am I right? Not, do I have a good reason to be angry? Not, don't they deserve this? Just one question. Toward my goal or away from it? Because here's what matters. You might be completely justified in your anger. The other person might be totally wrong. You might have every right to explode. But rights don't equal results. Being right doesn't protect your career. Being justified doesn't save your relationship. Having a good reason to react doesn't mean reacting is the smart move. The only thing that matters is whether your response moves you closer to what you actually want or further away from it. Let me tell you about a man who learnt this the hard way and then mastered it completely. He was a senior executive at a Fortune 500 company, well respected, high performer, on track for a VP position. Then he got falsely accused of something he didn't do. A colleague threw him under the bus to cover their own mistake. And the accusation was serious, career-ending serious. In the meeting where he was confronted, every part of him wanted to explode, to defend himself aggressively, to attack back, to expose the liar. And if he had reacted in that moment, he would have destroyed himself. Because emotional defense looks like guilt. Angry reactions look like desperation. But he didn't react. He paused. 3 seconds. And in that pause, he asked himself the question, will an emotional reaction right now move me toward keeping my job and my reputation, or away from it? The answer was obvious. Away from it. So instead of reacting, he responded. Calmly, strategically. He asked for time to gather documentation. He requested a formal review. He stayed controlled while the accuser became increasingly emotional and defensive. And within 2 weeks, the truth came out. The colleague was fired. He was cleared. And 6 months later, he got the VP position. He told me later that those 3 seconds saved his entire career, because in that pause, he shifted from emotional reaction to strategic response. And that shift is everything. Reactions are automatic. Responses are chosen. Reactions give power away. Responses keep it. Reactions feel good for 3 seconds and cost you for 3 years. Responses might feel uncomfortable in the moment, but win in the long run. So how do you build this habit? Because knowing you should pause and actually pausing when your emotions are screaming are very different things. You build it through repetition and a mantra. Every single time you feel triggered, even slightly, you practice the pause. Someone annoys you in traffic? Pause. Count. 1, 2, 3. Your kid talks back. Pause. Count. 1, 2, 3. You get a frustrating email. Pause. Count. 1, 2, 3. Every trigger is a training opportunity. Every moment of frustration is a chance to strengthen the pause muscle. Because that's what this is, a muscle. And like any muscle, it gets stronger with use. The first few times it'll be hard. Your emotions will fight you. Your brain will scream that you need to react right now. But you don't. You count, and you ask the question. And here's the mantra you install. Say it right now. I control my response. My response controls my future. Say it again. I control my response. My response controls my future. This is your identity statement. This is who you're becoming. Not someone who's controlled by their emotions, someone who controls their emotions. Not someone who reacts to everything, someone who responds strategically to what matters.
Because here's the reality. Emotional reactions feel powerful, but they're just weakness with volume. They're loss of control disguised as taking control. Real power is quiet. Real strength is the ability to feel the rage and choose not to express it. To feel the hurt and decide it doesn't dictate your behavior. To be triggered and remain unmoved externally, even while processing internally. This doesn't mean you suppress everything. This doesn't mean you become emotionless. This means you create choice. You feel the emotion fully. You acknowledge it, but you don't let it drive. You stay in the driver's seat. The emotion can be a passenger. It can have opinions, but it doesn't get to steer. And here's what happens when you master this. People can't control you anymore. Think about that. The co-workers who used to derail you with snarky comments, powerless. The family member who knew exactly how to push your buttons, ineffective. The stranger online trying to bait you into an argument, ignored. They pull the strings, but you don't dance. They push the buttons, but nothing happens, because you've disabled their access. You've taken back control. You also stop sabotaging yourself, because most self-sabotage happens in reactive moments. The diet you break because you're stressed. The email you send in anger that torches a relationship. The decision you make in frustration that costs you money. The thing you say in hurt that you can never take back. All of it happens because you reacted instead of responded. You let the emotion drive, and emotions are terrible drivers. They don't care about your goals. They don't think long term. They just want to feel better right now, regardless of the cost. The pause breaks that pattern. The pause gives you your power back. 3 seconds. That's all it takes. 3 seconds between what happens and what you do about it. 3 seconds to shift from automatic to intentional, from controlled to controlling. from reactive to strategic. So here's your practice. For the next 7 days, every single time you feel even slightly triggered, you pause and count. Out loud if you're alone, silently if you're not. 1, 2, 3. Then you ask the question, toward my goal or away from it? Then you respond accordingly. Not based on how you feel, based on where you're going. And when you feel the urge to react immediately, when your emotions are screaming for expression, you repeat the mantra. I control my response. My response controls my future. Because you do, and it does. The person who masters the pause becomes untouchable, uncontrollable, unshakable. That's who you're becoming. Lock it in. Chapter 4. Execute or stop consuming. You're drowning, right now, in information, podcasts, gardens, books, courses, articles, seminars, webinars, masterclasses. You're consuming constantly, learning endlessly, taking notes, highlighting, bookmarking, saving for later, and executing none of it. Absolutely none of it. You tell yourself you're investing in yourself, you're growing, you're preparing. But here's the truth. You're hoarding information as a substitute for action, and it's killing your progress. This is the consumption trap, and almost everyone is caught in it. You listen to a podcast about productivity while being completely unproductive. You watch videos about discipline while having none. You read books about wealth while staying broke. You take courses on entrepreneurship while never starting a business. And somehow you've convinced yourself this counts as progress. It doesn't. It's procrastination with a bookshelf.
Here's the brutal reality. Every hour you spend consuming content without executing it is an hour wasted. Worse than wasted. Because consumption without execution doesn't just fail to move you forward, it actively holds you back. It creates the illusion of progress. It makes you feel like you're doing something when you're doing nothing. And that false sense of accomplishment kills your urgency. Why would you take action when you already feel like you're moving forward? This ends right now. This habit is simple and non-negotiable. For every hour you consume content, you must execute one specific action from it within 24 hours. 1 hour of consumption equals one action executed within 1 day. No execution, no more consumption. Period. You don't get to open another book. You don't get to watch another video. You don't get to attend another webinar. Not until you've applied what you already learned. Think about how radical this is. Most people consume 10 hours of content and execute 0 actions. They listen to an entire audiobook and implement nothing. They binge watch a course and change nothing. They attend a conference, take pages of notes, and do nothing with any of it. Then they wonder why their life looks exactly the same month after month, year after year. The execution to consumption ratio is the measurement that matters, and for most people, it's completely inverted. They're heavy on input and non-existent on output. All learning, no doing. All theory, no practice. All planning, no executing. And they genuinely believe that consuming more will somehow fix this. It won't. More information will not solve a problem caused by not using the information you already have. Let me tell you about someone who learned this the expensive way. A woman who spent 5 years preparing to become an entrepreneur. 5 years. She read every book. Gary Vee, Seth Godin, Tim Ferriss, all of them. She took courses, hundreds of dollars on programs teaching her how to start a business. She went to seminars, networking events, workshops. She got certifications. She consumed everything she could find about entrepreneurship, marketing, sales, and business strategy. And after 5 years of this, do you know how much revenue she generated? 0. Not $1. Because she never actually started anything. She was always learning, always preparing, always getting ready to be ready. The consumption felt productive. It felt like progress, but it was just expensive, time-consuming procrastination. Then something shifted. She got tired of learning and decided to execute. She took one simple idea from one book she'd read 3 years earlier and actually implemented it. She started a service business helping local companies manage their social media. Nothing fancy, nothing revolutionary, just execution. And in her first year of actually doing instead of learning, she made $120,000. 1 year of execution beat 5 years of consumption. Let that sink in. 5 years of books, courses, and seminars produced nothing. 1 year of applied action produced 6 figures. The information wasn't the problem. She had plenty of information. The execution was the problem. And the moment she fixed that, everything changed. So here's the forcing mechanism you need to install immediately. Before you consume any new content, any at all, you ask yourself one question. What did I execute from the last thing I consumed? If the answer is nothing, you're banned. Banned from new input until you apply old input. Sounds harsh? It is. It's supposed to be. Because you need a forcing function, something that makes execution mandatory, not optional. Here's how this works practically. You listen to a 1-hour podcast about morning routines. Within 24 hours, you must implement one specific thing from that podcast. Wake up 30 minutes earlier, do 10 minutes of stretching, journal for 5 minutes, whatever. But something tangible must change in your behavior. If it doesn't, you don't get to listen to another podcast, not until you execute. You read a book about financial discipline. Before you open the next book, you execute one action. Set up automatic savings, cut one subscription, create a budget, track your spending for a week. Something concrete, something measurable, something that proves you're not just consuming, you're applying. You watch a video about communication skills. You practice one technique from that video in a real conversation within 24 hours. Then, and only then, do you get to watch another video. This is the rule. Consume, execute. Consume, execute. Never consume, consume, consume. That's hoarding. That's hiding. That's lying to yourself about progress. And here's what you'll discover when you implement this. You don't actually need more information. You need more execution of the information you already have. You probably know right now, today, at least 10 things you should be doing that you're not doing. You know you should wake up earlier, exercise more, eat better, save money, build skills, have hard conversations, work on your goals. You know this. The information is already there. The execution isn't. So stop lying to yourself that learning equals progress. Stop pretending that another book will give you what the last 15 didn't. Stop using consumption as a comfortable substitute for the uncomfortable work of execution. Because here's the truth nobody wants to say. Information is easy. It's comfortable. It's safe. You can consume content all day and never risk failure, never face rejection, never experience discomfort. Execution is different. Execution is risk. Execution is vulnerability. Execution is where you find out if you're actually capable or just well-read. Most people are terrified of that discovery, so they stay in perpetual learning mode, always preparing, never performing, always about to start, never actually starting, and they call this growth. It isn't growth, it's avoidance with a library card. Your new identity starts here. You are no longer a consumer. You're an executor who occasionally consumes to support execution. The consumption serves the execution, not the other way around. You don't execute to justify consuming more. You consume only what supports you executing better. So here's your immediate action. Look at the last 3 books you read, podcasts you heard, or videos you watched. Write down one specific action from each. Then execute all 3 within the next 72 hours. 3 pieces of content, 3 executions, 72 hours. And until those 3 actions are complete, you consume nothing new. Nothing. This is how you break the pattern. This is how consumption becomes useful instead of just comfortable. Execute or stop consuming. There's no third option. Lock it in. Chapter 5. Build in silence. Stop talking about what you're going to do. Seriously, stop. Every time you announce your goal, every time you tell people about your plan, every time you post about what you're starting, you're killing it. You're sabotaging yourself, and you don't even realize it. Here's what happens in your brain when you tell someone about your goal. You get a dopamine hit, the same neurochemical reward you'd get from actually achieving the goal. Your brain doesn't know the difference between doing the thing and talking about doing the thing. So when your friend says, "That's amazing, good for you," when you announce you're writing a book, your brain feels like you already wrote it. When your family congratulates you for starting a business, your brain registers accomplishment. When people like your post about your new fitness journey, you get the reward without the work. And then what happens? Nothing. You don't write the book. You don't start the business. You don't transform your body. Because your brain already got what it wanted: the validation, the recognition, the applause. And now the actual hard work of achieving the goal feels less urgent, less necessary, because you already feel like you succeeded. This is the validation trap, and it destroys more goals than laziness ever could, because it's subtle. You genuinely believe you're building accountability by announcing your plans. You think telling people makes you more likely to follow through. It doesn't. It makes you less likely, because you've already received the social reward that should have been waiting at the finish line. Silence is your competitive advantage. When you work in silence, you can't rely on external validation. You can't get your dopamine from announcements and applause. The only satisfaction available is the work itself, and that forces you to find internal motivation, to build discipline that doesn't need an audience, to develop the kind of relentless execution that happens whether anyone notices or not. The most successful people you've never heard of worked in silence for years. No social media posts, no announcements, no updates, just relentless, quiet execution. They built businesses while everyone thought they had regular jobs. They wrote books while no one knew they were writing. They developed skills while appearing to do nothing special. And then one day, the results became undeniable. The business launched, the book published, the skill became obvious, and the world noticed. Not because they announced it, because they built it. This is the pattern. Build in private, prove in public, not the reverse. Most people do it backwards. They announce in public and then try to build in private. But the announcement killed the urgency. The validation satisfied the craving, and the building never happens. Let me be specific. You need to implement the 90-day silence rule. Pick your most important goal right now, the one thing that would actually transform your life if you achieved it, and tell absolutely no one about it for 90 days. Not your spouse, not your best friend, not your social media followers. No one. 0 announcements, 0 updates, 0 mentions. Just silent, daily execution. This will be harder than you think, because you're addicted to the validation. You want to tell people. You want them to know you're doing something impressive. You want the credit for trying even before you've succeeded. But that want is exactly what's been killing your goals. That need for external recognition is the leak in your discipline. 90 days of silence trains you to work for the work itself, to find satisfaction in the process, not the performance, to build because you're building, not because anyone's watching. And here's what happens. Some days, no one knows you're grinding. No one's cheering you on. No one's giving you credit. And you do it anyway. That's when you know it's real. That's when you know the goal actually matters to you and isn't just a prop for your personal brand. After 90 days, one of two things happens. Either you've made real progress and have something concrete to show, or you've discovered the goal wasn't actually important to you. You just liked the idea of it. You liked how it sounded when you talked about it, but you didn't actually want to do the work. And that's valuable information, because now you can stop lying to yourself and focus on what you actually care about enough to build in silence. Here's the identity shift. You're not the person who announces anymore. You're not the person who posts about the journey. You're not the person who needs an audience to take action. You're the person who builds in silence and lets results do the talking. The person who shows up every day whether anyone notices or not. The person who doesn't need validation to keep going. If you can't stay quiet about your goal for 90 days, you don't actually want the goal. You want the attention. You want people to think you're the kind of person who does that thing, but you don't actually want to be that person. Because being that person requires work, and talking requires nothing. So here's the test. Right now, pick the goal. Commit to 90 days of absolute silence. No announcements, no hints, no updates, just execution. And when you want to tell someone, when you're craving that validation, You redirect that energy into the work. You do one more rep, write one more page, make one more call. The work becomes your announcement. Build in silence, prove in public. Reverse this and you'll fail publicly while pretending privately. Lock it in.
Chapter 6. Befriend Discomfort.
Daily comfort is killing you. Slowly, quietly, completely. Every day you choose the easy path, the convenient option, the comfortable decision. You're voting for a weaker version of yourself. And those votes add up. They compound. Until one day you look in the mirror and realize you've become someone who can't handle hard things. Someone who avoids challenge. Someone who needs everything to be easy or you won't do it at all. This is what comfort does. It doesn't just make you soft, it makes you incapable. Because your tolerance for discomfort determines your capacity for achievement. Everything worth having exists on the other side of discomfort. The body you want, the business you want to build, the relationship you want to improve, the skills you want to develop. All of it requires you to be uncomfortable. Repeatedly, consistently, without end. But here's what's happened. You've engineered discomfort out of your life. You've optimized for ease. You sleep in because it's comfortable. You eat junk because it's easier than meal prep. You avoid difficult conversations because they're uncomfortable. You skip workouts because they're hard. You stay in the job you hate because change is scary. You've built an entire existence around avoiding discomfort, and that existence is a prison. This ends now, because this habit requires one deliberate act of discomfort every single day. One thing you don't want to do. One thing that makes you resistant. One thing that requires you to override your brain's comfort-seeking programming. And you do it first, before anything else. Before you've warmed up, before you've eased in, you attack it. The specific act doesn't matter. Cold shower, difficult conversation, physical challenge, financial sacrifice, extra workout, uncomfortable phone call. The thing that scares you, the task you've been avoiding. What matters isn't the particular discomfort. What matters is the pattern. The daily choice to do what's hard instead of what's easy. Here's why this works. Your brain is wired to avoid pain and seek pleasure. That's evolutionary programming. It kept your ancestors alive. But in the modern world, it keeps you weak. Because there's no tiger chasing you anymore. No life or death survival pressure. Just an endless menu of comfortable options. And your brain will always choose the comfortable option unless you train it otherwise. When you voluntarily choose discomfort, you're rewiring that programming. You're teaching your brain that hard doesn't equal danger, that uncomfortable doesn't equal bad, that you're capable of doing things you don't want to do. And every time you do this, every single time you choose the hard thing over the easy thing, you're strengthening that neural pathway. You're building the discipline muscle. Let me tell you about someone who mastered this completely. A Marine Corps veteran who transitioned to business after his service. He credits his entire success, multiple 7 figures in annual revenue, to one single habit. Every morning, he identifies the hardest task on his list, the one he least wants to do, the one he's most likely to avoid or delay, and he does it first, before email, before calls, before anything else. He attacks the hardest thing when his discipline is strongest. He told me this habit came from his military training. In the Marines, you don't get to choose comfort. You do hard things when you're tired, when you're scared, when every part of you wants to quit. And that training rewired his brain. Hard became normal. Discomfort became expected. And when he entered the business world, he had a massive advantage. Because while his competitors were avoiding difficult conversations, hard decisions, and uncomfortable tasks, he was running toward them. That's what this habit builds. It builds identity. You become the person who doesn't flinch when hard things appear, the person who doesn't need optimal conditions to perform, the person who can execute regardless of how they feel. And that person has an unfair advantage in a world full of people who only operate when they're comfortable. So here's the implementation. Every single morning, before you do anything else, you identify your discomfort task. What's the one thing on today's list that you're most resistant to? What are you most likely to procrastinate on? What feels hardest right now? That's your target, and you do it immediately. No warm-up, no easing in, no doing easier things first to build momentum. You attack it cold. This is critical. You don't save the hard thing for later when you're ready. You'll never be ready. Your brain will never say, okay, now I feel like doing the uncomfortable thing. That moment doesn't come, so you don't wait for it. You act in spite of the resistance. You move toward the discomfort instead of away from it. And here's what happens over time. Your tolerance expands. Things that used to feel impossible become manageable. Challenges that used to make you anxious become normal. You develop what psychologists call stress inoculation. Just like a vaccine exposes you to a small amount of a virus to build immunity, voluntary discomfort exposes you to small amounts of stress to build resilience. A cold shower used to feel unbearable. Now it's just your morning routine. A difficult conversation used to keep you up at night. Now you initiate them without hesitation. A challenging workout used to be something you dreaded. Now it's where you feel most alive. The discomfort doesn't disappear. You just become someone who can handle it. This is the identity shift. You're not trying to become comfortable with discomfort. That's a myth. Discomfort always feels uncomfortable. But you become someone who does uncomfortable things anyway. Someone who doesn't let feelings dictate actions. Someone who has mastered the gap between I don't want to and I'm doing it anyway. Most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid discomfort, optimizing for ease, choosing the path of least resistance. And they wonder why they never grow, why they never achieve anything significant, why their lives feel small. Because growth lives in discomfort. Achievement requires discomfort. Transformation demands discomfort. There is no version of this where you get everything you want while staying comfortable. So here's your practice. Tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, before you ease into your day, you identify the hardest thing on your list, and you do it. Immediately, aggressively, without negotiation. And you do this every single day. One deliberate act of discomfort. One voluntary choice to do what's hard instead of what's easy. And when the resistance comes, when your brain screams for the easier option, when every part of you wants to delay or avoid, you remember this. Comfort is not your friend. Comfort is the slow death of your potential. Discomfort is where you become someone new, someone capable, someone strong, someone who doesn't need perfect conditions to perform. Befriend discomfort daily. It's the only path forward. Lock it in. Chapter 7. Protect your energy. Your energy is being stolen. Right now. Today. Every single day. And you're letting it happen. You're tolerating people who drain you, environments that exhaust you, commitments that deplete you, apps that steal your attention, conversations that leave you weaker. And you act like this is normal, like you have unlimited energy to waste on things and people that give nothing back. You don't. Your energy is the most finite resource you have, more valuable than your time, more critical than your money, because you can make more money. You can create more time through efficiency, but you cannot manufacture more energy. You get what you get each day, and when it's gone, it's gone. So the question isn't whether you should protect your energy. The question is why you haven't been protecting it already. Here's the truth most people refuse to accept. You're surrounded by energy thieves, people who take and never give, situations that drain and never refill, habits that cost and never pay. And you've been tolerating them for so long you don't even notice anymore. It just feels normal to be tired, normal to be depleted, normal to have nothing left at the end of the day for the things and people that actually matter. This is not normal. This is self-destruction in slow motion. Because every day you give your energy to things that don't deserve it, you're stealing from the things that do. Your goals, your growth, your family, your health, your peace. They get whatever's left over. And most days, there's nothing left over. Because you gave it all away to energy thieves you should have eliminated months ago. So here's the habit. Every single week, you conduct a 15-minute energy audit. You sit down and you ask yourself 3 questions. What drained me this week? Who left me weaker? What am I tolerating that I should eliminate? You write down the answers, and then you take action. You remove one energy thief every single week. One person, one commitment, one habit, one app, one environment. Gone. This sounds simple. It's not, because removing energy thieves requires you to do things you've been avoiding. Set boundaries, end relationships, say no, disappoint people, walk away from commitments, delete apps you're addicted to, stop going places you hate. And all of that feels hard, uncomfortable, sometimes even cruel. But here's what's actually cruel: continuing to give your energy to things that are destroying you. Let me tell you about a man who finally did this. He had 5 people he called friends, people he'd known for years, people he talked to regularly. And one day, during his energy audit, he noticed a pattern. All 5 of these friends only contacted him when they needed something: money, advice, help moving, a favor, a connection. But they never called to celebrate him, never reached out to support him, never checked in just because they cared. The relationship was completely one-directional. He gave, they took, every single time. So he made a decision. He cut all 5 in 1 month. Stopped answering, stopped reaching out, let the relationships die through distance and silence. And you know what happened? Not one of them fought for the friendship. Not one reached out to ask what was wrong. Because they didn't actually value him. They valued what he provided. Was he lonely for a while? Yes, absolutely. Cutting 5 relationships at once leaves a gap. But here's what else happened. He had energy again. Energy he'd been pouring into those one-sided friendships. Energy that was now available for people who actually reciprocated. For goals that actually mattered. For activities that actually filled him up instead of drainage him. Within 6 months, he'd built new friendships with people who gave as much as they took, and his life completely transformed. Not because he added something, because he removed something. That's what energy protection does. It creates space for what matters by eliminating what doesn't. But you have to be ruthless about it. You have to be willing to cut things and people you've been tolerating for years. And that requires you to answer one question honestly before you commit to anything. Before you say yes to any request, any invitation, any relationship, any commitment, you ask yourself, will this give me energy or drain it? If it drains, the answer is no. No explanation, no justification, no guilt, just no. Because your energy is not negotiable. It's not something you give away to be nice. It's not something you sacrifice to avoid conflict. It's the foundation of everything else in your life. And without it, nothing else works. Your discipline fails. Your patience disappears. Your creativity dies. Your relationships suffer. Your goals stall. Everything collapses when your energy is gone. So you protect it like you'd protect your child, with absolute ferocity, with zero tolerance for theft. You guard your energy the same way you'd guard your bank account, because it is your bank account. Every interaction is a transaction. Every commitment is a withdrawal. Every environment is either a deposit or a theft, and you need to know which is which. Here's how you identify energy thieves. They're the people who leave you feeling worse after every interaction, the commitments you dread, the environments where you have to fake enthusiasm, the apps you open out of compulsion, not intention, the conversations that loop without resolution, the relationships where you give everything and receive nothing, the obligations you fulfill out of guilt, not desire. Write them down, all of them. Be specific, don't generalize, don't soften it. My friend Sarah, who only calls when she needs something. The committee I joined 2 years ago that I hate. Instagram, which I scroll mindlessly for hours. My cousin's monthly dinner that drains me for 3 days. Name them, because you can't eliminate what you won't identify. Then start cutting, 1 per week. That's the commitment. Every week, 1 energy thief gets eliminated. You resign from the committee. You delete the app. You stop attending the dinner. You end the friendship. And yes, there will be consequences. People will be upset. They'll question you. They'll try to guilt you back in. Let them. Their opinion of your boundaries is not your responsibility. Here's what you need to understand. The people who benefit from you having no boundaries will always be upset when you establish them. The energy thieves will always resist being cut off. That's how you know you're doing it right. If everyone's happy with your boundaries, you don't have boundaries. You have suggestions. Real boundaries create friction. They disappoint people. They end relationships. They force you to choose yourself over someone else's comfort, and that feels selfish. Good. Be selfish with your energy, because if you're not selfish with it, you'll have nothing left for the people and goals that actually deserve it. Your energy is a gift. Stop giving it to people who treat it like an entitlement. Stop wasting it on commitments that don't align with your goals. Stop tolerating environments that deplete you. Stop checking apps that steal your attention. Stop maintaining relationships that only flow one direction. Stop pretending you have unlimited capacity to give. You don't. You're finite. And every day you pretend otherwise, you move further from everything you actually want. So conduct the audit, ask the questions, identify the thieves, and eliminate them. 1 per week, every week, until your life contains only people, places, and commitments that either give you energy or deserve the energy you give them. Protect your energy with the same intensity you'd protect your life, because it is your life. Without energy, you have nothing. Guard it, ruthlessly. Lock it in. Chapter 8. Collect your failures. You're terrified of failing, publicly, visibly, where people can see it, where people can judge you, where people can say, "I told you so," or "You're not good enough," or "You should have known better." So you don't try, you don't apply, you don't launch, you don't put yourself out there, because if you never try, you can never fail, and if you never fail, you never have to face that fear. Except you're already failing. You're failing by default. You're failing through inaction. You're failing at everything you never attempted because you were too afraid of visible failure to risk it. And that's the worst kind of failure, because at least when you try and fail, you learn something. You gain data. You build resilience. But when you fail by never trying, you gain nothing. You learn nothing. You just stay exactly where you are, safe and stuck and small. This is what the fear of failure does. It doesn't protect you, it imprisons you. It keeps you from opportunities, from growth, from discovery, from the life you actually want. Because everything worth having requires you to risk failure. The relationship, the business, the career change, the creative project, the physical transformation. All of it sits on the other side of potential failure. And if you're not willing to fail, you're not willing to succeed. So here's the habit that breaks this pattern completely. You're going to actively pursue one small failure per month. Not avoid failure. Pursue it. Deliberately. Intentionally. You're going to apply for something you'll probably be rejected from. Attempt something you'll likely mess up. Post something that might get criticized. Ask for something you'll probably be denied. You're going to seek out the rejection you've been hiding from your entire life. This is exposure therapy for your ego, and your ego desperately needs it. Because right now, your ego is running your life. It's keeping you safe. It's protecting you from judgment. It's ensuring you never look foolish or incompetent or inexperienced. And in doing so, it's ensuring you never grow, never improve, never become more than you currently are. When you actively pursue failure, you're training your ego that failure is not fatal, that rejection doesn't kill you, that embarrassment is temporary, that you can survive looking stupid and still be okay. And every time you prove this to yourself, the fear loses power, the ego's grip weakens, and you become free to try things without needing guaranteed success. Let me tell you about an entrepreneur who mastered this completely. He had a business idea, a good one, but he needed funding, so he started pitching investors, and he got rejected. Again and again and again. 30 times. 30 investors said no. But here's what happened during those 30 rejections. The first 5 destroyed him emotionally. He took each one personally, questioned his idea, questioned himself, considered quitting. But by rejection 10, something shifted. He was still disappointed, but he didn't internalize it the same way. By rejection 15, he stopped flinching. The no's became data, not verdicts. By rejection 20, he was almost numb to it. By rejection 25, he was confident. Not because his idea had changed, because he had changed. He'd built immunity to rejection through repeated exposure. Investor number 31 said yes, funded the entire project. The business launched. Within 3 years, it was worth 8 figures. But here's what he told me. The business success wasn't the transformation. The rejection training was. Because now he's psychologically incapable of being stopped by fear of failure. He's been rejected so many times that one more rejection means nothing. And when rejection means nothing, you become unstoppable. That's what this habit builds. Immunity. Not to failure itself, but to the fear of failure. And the fear is what stops you, not the actual failure. Because actual failure is just information, just feedback, just data about what doesn't work so you can adjust and try again. But the fear of failure prevents you from collecting that data. It keeps you frozen, paralyzed, stuck in analysis and planning and getting ready forever. So here's how you implement this. You create a failure resume, an actual document, digital or physical, doesn't matter. And you track every rejection, every mistake, every public failure, every time you tried something and it didn't work. You write it down. The date, what you tried, what happened, how you felt. And then you move on to the next attempt. This is critical. You're not collecting failures to dwell on them, you're collecting them to prove a pattern. The pattern that you survive. Every single time. You got rejected from that job. You survived. You launched that project and it flopped. You survived. You asked someone out and they said no. You survived. You posted something online and got criticized. You survived. You tried to start that business and it failed. You survived. 100% of your failures to date have been survivable. You're still here, still breathing, still capable of trying again. The failure didn't destroy you. The embarrassment didn't kill you. The rejection didn't end your story. It just became part of your story. A paragraph, not the conclusion. And when you review your failure resume monthly, which you will, you see this pattern clearly. You see that the things you were terrified of turned out to be minor, temporary, sometimes even beneficial, because half the failures on your list probably led to better opportunities. The job you didn't get led to the better job you found. The relationship that ended made space for the right relationship. The business that failed taught you what you needed to know for the business that succeeded. But you can only see this in retrospect. You can only see the pattern when you track it, when you document it, when you force yourself to review the evidence that failure is not fatal. That's why the failure resume is mandatory, not optional, mandatory. Here's the identity shift happening. You're becoming someone who fails regularly and doesn't care. Not because failure doesn't matter, but because you've proven to yourself that you're bigger than any individual failure. That one rejection, one mistake, one public embarrassment doesn't define you. That you're the sum of your attempts, not your successes. And the more you attempt, even when many of those attempts fail, the more you achieve. Think about what this does to your risk tolerance. Right now, you probably only try things when success feels likely, when the odds are in your favor, when you're reasonably confident you won't fail. That's a tiny percentage of available opportunities. But when you've trained yourself through repeated failure exposure that rejection and mistakes are just part of the process, you can try everything. Apply for everything. Attempt everything. Because failure is no longer the threat. Avoiding failure is the threat. A life so small you never risked failure is the actual catastrophe, not the failures themselves. Those are just moments, learning experiences, data points. But a life lived entirely inside your comfort zone, where you only do what you're sure you can succeed at, that's the tragedy. Because you'll never know what you were capable of. You'll never discover your actual limits. You'll never experience the growth that only comes through attempting hard things and sometimes failing at them. So here's your practice. This month, right now, identify one thing you've been avoiding because you're afraid of failure. One application you haven't submitted. One project you haven't launched. One conversation you haven't initiated. One goal you haven't pursued. And do it. Knowing you might fail. Expecting you might fail. Accepting that failure is a possible and acceptable outcome. Then document it in your failure resume. Whether you succeed or fail, it goes on the resume. Because the win isn't the outcome. The win is that you tried, that you faced the fear, that you collected the data, that you proved to yourself one more time that attempting and failing is better than never attempting at all. Do this monthly. One deliberate risk, one potential failure, one exposure to the thing you've been hiding from, and watch what happens over 6 months, 12 months, 24 months. You become someone completely different. Someone who doesn't need certainty to act. Someone who doesn't need guaranteed success to try. Someone who's been rejected and embarrassed and failed so many times that one more time means nothing. That person is free. Free to attempt anything. Free to pursue everything. Free from the prison of needing to look perfect and competent and successful at all times. That person wins, not because they never fail, because they fail constantly and keep moving anyway. Collect your failures, build the resume, review it monthly, and become unfailable. Not perfect, unfailable. There's a difference. Lock it in. Chapter 9. The Sunday Review. Most people set goals in January and forget them by February. Not because they don't care, not because the goals weren't important, but because they never look at them again. They set the intention once and then just hope momentum carries them forward. It doesn't. Momentum without direction is just chaos, and chaos without recalibration is guaranteed failure. Here's what actually happens. You start strong. First week, you're executing. Second week, still going. Third week, you slip a little. Fourth week, you've drifted significantly. By week 6, you're barely recognizable from the person who set those goals. And by week 8, you've completely abandoned them. Not dramatically, not with a conscious decision to quit. You just slowly drifted until you were so far off course that getting back on felt impossible. This is the pattern, and it happens because you never built in a recalibration mechanism. You never created a system to catch the drift before it becomes a disaster. You just set the goal and hoped discipline would sustain itself indefinitely. It won't. Discipline requires maintenance. Consistency requires review. Progress requires measurement. And without a weekly system to ensure you're still on track, you're guaranteed to drift. So here's the habit that prevents all of this. Every Sunday, 30 minutes, non-negotiable. You review the previous week and plan the next one. You ask yourself what worked, what failed, what needs adjustment. You measure your execution against your intentions. You identify where you drifted and why, and then you make the corrections before the drift becomes permanent. This is not optional. This is not something you do when you feel like it or when you have time. This is a locked-in appointment with yourself. Same day, same time, every single week. Because the moment you make it optional, it becomes occasional. And occasional review produces occasional results. You don't want occasional. You want consistent. And consistent requires weekly. Here's why this works. Small drifts are easy to correct. If you drifted from your diet on Tuesday and you catch it on Sunday, that's a 5-day drift. Correctable. Manageable. No big deal. But if you don't catch it until the end of the month, that's a 25-day drift. Now you've built a pattern. You've created momentum in the wrong direction. And reversing that takes 10 times more effort than a simple 5-day correction would have. Weekly review catches problems while they're still small, before they become identity, before they become habits, before they become who you are. It creates a forcing function that prevents you from lying to yourself about your progress. Because you can lie for 6 days. You can rationalize and justify and pretend everything's fine. But when you sit down with the page and have to write what you actually did versus what you said you'd do, the lie becomes obvious. Let me give you the framework. 5 questions, every Sunday, written down. Not just thought about, written. Because thoughts lie. Thoughts let you off the hook. But the page demands honesty. The page reflects exactly what you did, Not what you wish you did or meant to do or almost did, just what actually happened. Question 1. Did I execute my non-negotiables? The 5 daily actions you pre-decided in Chapter 2. Did they happen? Every day? Be specific. If you missed one, write which one and why. No generalizations. No mostly. Either you did them or you didn't. Question 2. Where did I react emotionally instead of strategically? The pause from Chapter 3. Where did you lose it? Where did someone trigger you and you reacted instead of responded? Write the specific situations. What happened? How you reacted? What you should have done instead? Question 3. What did I consume versus what did I execute? This is the ratio from Chapter 4. How many hours of content did you consume? How many specific actions did you execute from that content? If the ratio is off, if you consumed more than you executed, you're hoarding again. Acknowledge it. Fix it. Question 4. What energy thieves did I tolerate this week? From Chapter 7. Who drained you? What environments depleted you? What commitments took more than they gave? Write them down. Then commit to eliminating at least one this coming week. Question 5. What discomfort did I choose? Chapter 6. Did you do one hard thing every day? Did you attack the difficult tasks first? Or did you drift back into comfort seeking? Be honest. The page will know if you're lying. These 5 questions force you to confront reality, not the story you're telling yourself about how you're doing, the actual data, the real execution, the measurable results. And when you do this every week, you can't drift for long. You can't lie to yourself for more than 6 days, because Sunday is coming, and Sunday demands truth. A CEO I know credits his entire business turnaround to this practice. His company was failing, revenue declining, team disengaged. He was working constantly, but nothing was improving. Then he implemented the Sunday review. 30 minutes, 5 questions, written answers. And within the first month, he discovered the problem. He was reacting to everything. Every email, every customer complaint, every employee issue. He had 0 strategic time because he was spending all his energy on reactive tasks. The review exposed this, and once he saw it clearly, written on the page week after week, he couldn't ignore it anymore. He made changes, blocked strategic time, stopped responding to every fire, delegated reactive tasks. Within 6 months, the company stabilized. Within a year, it was profitable again. Not because he worked harder, because he reviewed weekly and corrected course constantly. That's the power of this habit. It creates continuous improvement through continuous feedback. You're not waiting until the end of the year to see if you hit your goals. You're measuring every week, adjusting every week, correcting every week. And those weekly micro-adjustments compound into massive annual results. But here's the critical part. You have to write it down. You cannot skip this step. Thinking about your week is not reviewing your week. Mentally reflecting is not the same as documented accountability. Because your brain will protect you. It will soften the truth. It will highlight the wins and minimize the losses. It will let you believe you're doing better than you are. The page won't do that. The page is ruthless. When you write, I executed my non-negotiables 2 out of 7 days, you can't pretend that's good. When you write, I consumed 8 hours of content and executed 0 actions, you can't rationalize that away. When you write, I tolerated the same energy thieves I identified last week and did nothing about them, you're forced to confront your inaction. This discomfort is the point. The review should make you slightly uncomfortable. If you finish your Sunday review feeling great about everything, you're either crushing it at an elite level or you're lying. Most weeks you'll see a mix. Some wins, some losses, some progress, some drift. And the goal is not perfection. The goal is awareness followed by adjustment. Here's your implementation. Pick your time. Sunday evening works for most people. End of the week before the new week starts. 30 minutes blocked on your calendar. Non-negotiable. Same time every week. Then, get a dedicated notebook or document. Something permanent where you can see previous reviews. This matters because the pattern over weeks and months tells you more than any single week. Then you answer the 5 questions. Honestly, specifically, in writing, no exceptions. No skipping weeks because you were busy. No avoiding it because you know you underperformed, especially not then. The weeks you don't want to review are the weeks you need to review most. And here's what happens after 12 weeks of this. You'll have 12 data points, 12 honest assessments of your execution, and you'll see patterns. You'll see that you always skip your non-negotiables on Thursdays, or that you always react emotionally in team meetings, or that you consume most on weekends and execute least. These patterns are invisible without the review, but with it, they're undeniable. And once you see the pattern, you can break it. You can pre-decide your Thursday differently. You can prepare specifically for team meetings. You can eliminate weekend content consumption. But you can only fix what you can see, and the Sunday review makes everything visible. So here's your practice. This Sunday, 30 minutes, answer the 5 questions. In writing. Be honest. Then, next Sunday, do it again. And the Sunday after that. And every Sunday for the rest of your life. Because this isn't a temporary habit. This is how you ensure you never drift so far you can't get back. This is how you stay on course. This is how consistency becomes automatic. Review weekly or drift monthly. There's no third option. Lock it in. Chapter 10. Choose your 2026 self. Let's be completely clear about what just happened here. You didn't just learn 7 habits. You were given a complete operating system. A framework that replaces every weak pattern that's been keeping you stuck. And now you have a choice to make. The only choice that actually matters. Are you going to execute this? Or are you going to do what you always do? Get excited for 48 hours, then return to the exact same patterns that have been failing you. Because here's the reality. Most of you won't do this. You'll agree with everything you heard. You'll recognize the truth in it. You'll feel motivated right now. You might even tell someone about it. But you won't actually change. You'll consume this content the same way you consume everything else, as information, as entertainment, as something interesting to think about, but not important enough to act on. And 1 year from now, when 2027 starts, you'll be exactly where you are today. Same struggles, same frustrations, same gap between who you say you want to be and who you actually are. Because nothing changes until you change. And you don't change by listening, you change by executing. So let's talk about what execution actually looks like here. These 7 habits are not separate. They're not individual additions to your life. They work together as a system. And the system only works when all the pieces are in place. Let me show you how they connect. You pre-decide your non-negotiables. That eliminates hesitation and builds consistency. But consistency without emotional control is fragile. So you master the pause. You create that 3-second gap between stimulus and response. Now you're consistent and controlled. But if you're consuming constantly and executing nothing, consistency means nothing. So you execute what you consume or stop consuming. Now you're consistent, controlled, and actually applying what you learn. But if you announce everything, you'll kill your momentum with premature validation. So you build in silence. Now you're consistent, controlled, executing, and working for internal satisfaction instead of external applause. But all of this collapses when discomfort arrives, unless you've trained yourself to handle it. So you befriend discomfort daily. You teach your brain that hard is normal. Now you're becoming someone who doesn't need perfect conditions to perform. But even with all of this, if your energy is being stolen by people and commitments that drain you, you won't have fuel for execution. So you protect your energy ruthlessly. You eliminate the thieves. Now you have the energy to sustain everything else. And when fear of failure tries to stop you from attempting what matters, you have your failure resume, proving that failure is survivable. So you pursue failure deliberately until rejection means nothing. And finally, All of this requires weekly recalibration to prevent drift. So you conduct your Sunday review. You measure, you adjust, you course correct before small problems become permanent patterns. You see how this works? Each habit supports the others. Each one makes the next one possible. Together, they create a foundation that doesn't crack under pressure. It strengthens. But here's what this actually requires. You can't execute these habits as the person you currently are. That person got you here. That person has the life you currently have. And if you want a different life, you need to become a different person. Not a better version, a different person entirely. From reactive to strategic. From validation seeking to self-validated. From comfort addicted to discomfort adapted. From consumer to executor. From announcer to builder. From energy generous to energy protective. From failure avoidant to failure immune. From drifting to reviewing. This is not an upgrade. This is a replacement. And that means you're going to lose things. You're going to lose relationships that can't survive your boundaries. You're going to lose the comfort of staying where you are. You're going to lose the validation you got from announcing your plans. You're going to lose the easy dopamine of consuming without executing. You're going to lose the friends who only valued what you gave them. You're going to lose the version of yourself that needed everything to be easy. Good. Let them go. Because what you gain is worth infinitely more than what you lose. You gain control. You gain consistency. You gain the ability to execute regardless of how you feel. You gain freedom from other people's opinions. You gain resilience that can't be broken. You gain energy to spend on what actually matters. You gain immunity to the fear that's been stopping you. You gain clarity through weekly truth-telling. You gain yourself back. The version that's been buried under weak patterns and comfortable excuses and fear of what other people think. That person has been waiting for you to choose them, and the choice happens now. Not tomorrow, not when you're ready, not when circumstances are perfect. Now. So here's the final accountability question, the only one that matters. A year from now, will you look back at this moment as the turning point? Or will you be listening to something else, reading something else, consuming something else, still planning to change, but never actually changing? Because 2026 will expose you, either as someone who finally executed or someone who talked about it again. Someone who built these 7 habits into an automatic system, or someone who thought about it and did nothing. Someone who became different, or someone who stayed the same while hoping for different results. These 7 habits are the requirement, not suggestions, not ideas to consider. The requirement for the transformation you say you want. And the gap between reading this and executing this is the same execution gap we talked about in Chapter 1. The gap that separates people who achieve from people who just intend to achieve. So what's it going to be? Comfort or control? You already know you can't have both. You've known that this entire time. The question is which one you're actually going to choose, not which one you say you'll choose. Which one your actions over the next 7 days prove you chose. Start today, right now. Pick one habit, just one, and execute it for 7 days straight. Then add the next. You don't need all 7 immediately. You need one executed consistently, then another, until the system is complete and automatic. You don't need more information. You have everything you need right now. You need execution. You need to close this and do the hardest thing on your list immediately. Not later, not after you think about it. Now. That's how you know you're serious. That's how you prove to yourself this time is different. 2026 is your choice. Make it count. Let's be clear about what just happened. You didn't just listen to habit advice. You were given a complete system to rewire how you operate under pressure. 7 habits, 7 specific attacks on the weaknesses keeping you stuck. Pre-decide your non-negotiables so hesitation dies. Delay your emotional response so you can't be controlled. Execute what you consume or stop consuming. Build in silence until results speak. Befriend discomfort until it's normal. Audit and eliminate your energy thieves. Pursue failure until rejection is meaningless. Review every week so you never drift. This isn't optional if you want 2026 to be different. This is the requirement. The only question left is whether you will actually do it. Because here's the truth no one wants to say. Most of you won't. You'll agree with everything you heard, feel motivated for 48 hours, then return to the exact patterns that have been failing you. Prove me wrong, not with words, with action. Start today. Pick one habit, execute it for 7 days, then add the next. You don't need more information, you need more execution. So here's your challenge. Close this video and do the hardest thing on your list right now. Not later, now. That's how you know you're serious. That's how 2026 becomes the year everything changed. Go.